If you like this content, please remember to hit like, leave a comment, subscribe, and share with someone who might enjoy this too. Chapter 17. I'm sitting under the shade of an ancient sycamore, its lowest limb serving as my mezzanine seat to watch the Ryans and their farmhands open the gates separating the upper and lower grazing pastures. It's easy to spot the Ryan men from the farmhands as they all shared the same rugged Marlborough man swagger. Tuck looks exactly like his 5 older brothers, but he stands out because of the cocky way he tempts fate in the way he barely hangs on to Bravo as they sail through the river of cattle, cascading through the open gates. His brothers are cautious in their speed and handling of their horses. They stay on the perimeter of the river of cattle. It's evident that the Ryan boys have done this many times, this dance between man and beast. It takes Mr. Ryan only a few whoops and hand signals to get his boys and the 2 farmhands to drive the hundreds of cattle from one pasture into the other, the dance concluding with a metallic jingle of chains through steel bars. Tuck gives Bravo's silver flank a gentle nudge and they gallop toward Mr. Ryan. I watch as Tuck gestures in my direction and Mr. Ryan removes his brow Stetson and waves it high above his silver head. I raise a hand and wave back enthusiastically. It's the first time I've seen another human being in almost a month. I choke up and I'm not sure why. I suppose it's acknowledgement that I am real and not just a ghost haunting the old homestead. Tuck and Bravo sprint through the prairie and up the hillside toward me. They come to a halt a few feet away from me, but the dust they've stirred hits me in the face and I can taste it, smell it, and it blinds me. "Sorry, Rosie," I hear Tuck say. I feel his hand on my free arm as I shield my face until the dust has passed. I shimmy to the edge of the cradling arm of the sycamore to jump down, but Tuck has a firm hold around my waist. I'm gently lowered to earth. I open my eyes and dust myself off to no avail. Tuck glances up at the scorching sun making its way into the west. He squares his shoulders in the direction of the cabin and together we stroll back. "Hey, I think I'm pregnant," I say. I mean, I've never been, and it could be stress, I can't finish the thought. Tuck hitches in his step then quickly collects himself. He removes his Stetson and tucks it under his left arm, fiddling with the brim. We walk in silence for a long moment. We descend the hill. "From way back in May?" he asks. I nod. Neither of us know what to say. Suddenly I'm afraid. I still find that I'm holding on to hope that one day Tuck will tire of me, and I'll go home, wherever that might be. I can't fathom the difficulty of starting over with a baby in tow. After Brent kicked me out of our home, I moved back to North Carolina, lived in my car and dingy motels, and waited tables until I was hired as a project manager on base. Now I can't imagine doing that again. I don't want my child to live in a car or a dingy motel until I get back on my feet. I count the days. I've been gone long enough to be wiped off the employee roll. In a matter of days, I will be replaced. My immediate supervisor hated me for some unknown reason and was probably gleeful to notify HR of my failure to report. "What will you do with me when you grow tired of me, Tuck?" I ask. He takes my hand. "What do you mean?" he asks. I don't know why, but I don't want to die, Tuck. But I don't know where I'm going with that thought. He stops and we face one another. "Rosie, I promise I will never hurt you. I will take care of you until we're old. You and I will live out the rest of our lives in comfort. We'll raise our kids together and watch them grow. We'll be here when they leave. They'll always have a place to come back to." Maybe it's written all over my face, but I want to tell him I'm too young to spend the rest of my life bound to this ancient place. Tuck's brows furrow in concern. "What's wrong, Rosie?" I want to go home, Tuck. Having a baby doesn't change anything?" I shake my head. He drops his head and gives me a slow shake. He squares his shoulders in the direction of the cabin again and we walk the remainder of our walk in silence. Chapter 18. Rosie, August 2017. We are in the heart of the dog days of summer. I say we because my little one is making himself known. I had doubted my pregnancy in the beginning. I am not particularly lucky. I can't explain how I know he's a he, or that he is becoming his own person. I suppose it is the dulling of my perpetual sense of loneliness that signals his presence. As I water the garden in the early morning light, I wonder, how did my mother and every woman who came before me adjust to their imprisonment? My mother was in her early teens when she was told she would become my father's wife. I assume it was much the same for my maternal and paternal grandmothers too. From the infrequency and bitterness in my mother's voice when she did speak of her induction into my family, I can only surmise that it had been a jolting experience. My mother had been far younger than I am now and, in some ways, it might have been easier to accept defeat. My mother had been raised right, too. She had been groomed from an early age to expect that she was doomed to leave her family as soon as she hit puberty. Her education solely consisted of cooking, cleaning, and raising babies. My heart broke for my mother then and still now, even though she's been dead 2 years. I've known since I was a child that it wasn't easy straddling the cultural fence because I also straddled that fence between being a good Hmong girl and a good American girl. I've always known my mother and I had different upbringings. Yes, I was taught from the moment I could walk and talk how to cook, clean, and raise babies. I remember at the age of 5 being able to feed myself and my 3 younger sisters. Looking after literal babies when I was only 3 years older than my next sister in line. But what I had that my mother didn't have was the opportunity to attend school. To be sold the liberal dream of being more than just plain old me. We were sold completely different dreams of the future, and perhaps all these things can explain how she accepted her fate, and I continue to dream of freedom. I've known since I was a child that it wasn't easy raising a strong-willed daughter like me. My parents always told me I was difficult, hard-headed, and entitled. My older sister too. As a child I always wished I was different because all I wanted was my mother's love and, more importantly, her acceptance. At the end of the day though, I was plain old me. I suppose my sense of entitlement came from my paternal grandfather. I was 2 going on 3 years old when, unexpectedly, my father dropped me off at a double-wide trailer in the middle of nowhere. It was my great-aunt and uncle's trailer. It was also where my grandfather lived for the first year we were in the United States after emigrating. I was inconsolable because I missed my mother, because I was afraid, because I did not understand why my father had abandoned me. My grandfather and I had always been close, even in the refugee camp. My grandfather, for some odd reason, took a liking to me from the moment I was born. Throughout our 1.5 years in the refugee camp in Thailand, and up till the moment we parted ways when we landed in America. He picked me up after a long day working in the fields and we settled on a mattress on the floor. I swear I can still smell him when I'm sad, and I become sad when I swear I can smell him. He smelled of country air, Marlboro cigarette, and sweat. He rocked me to sleep softly, murmuring a story about a magical swan. Even as I grew up, he continued to be my favorite person. He was the only person in my life I could turn to for affection. We never professed our affections for one another in my family, it was more subtle, like a firm grasp of the hand when crossing the street or a single-arm snuggle at night. It was serving the one you loved the best bite of food or merely being in one another's orbit. My favorite memory of that man consists of holding his hand while we walked rain or shine, snow or sun, while he smoked a cigarette with no particular destination in mind. He died when I was 10 or 11 years old. He had a stroke and died on the floor of some casino in Green Bay, Wisconsin. By then the damage had been done. I'd been treated like a valuable human being, and so I demanded to be treated with some semblance of decency by my parents. I didn't like being hit or scolded because my grandfather never did those things to me, and I couldn't understand why the 2 people who were supposed to protect me were the ones hurting me. I demanded to have things explained to me instead of dictated because my grandfather took the time to explain himself to me. I catch a glimpse of Tuck out the corner of my eye. He is a silent sentinel. He is always nearby, ready to swoop in and take over any chore. I can't tell if he is trying to earn my affection, or he really is that restless. His dark head is bowed as he stands over the kitchen sink. He's making breakfast. It's his favorite thing to do. It's the only meal he can make. Rosie, breakfast is ready, Tuck calls from inside the house. I set the hose down at the edge of the struggling tomato bed. Tuck hands me a mug of coffee with just a splash of cream. He settles across from me and waits for me to take the first bite. I take a small corner of French toast and begin to eat. Is there anything you want to do today, Rosie? He asks. I can only think of one thing, fishing. Same time last year I took my first vacation as an adult. I stayed at a beachfront hotel and spent every waking moment sitting in the sand with my surf pole in the water. I wasn't after anything in particular, I simply enjoyed watching the shoreline bubble with life as the tides changed. It's funny the things you think about when you have nothing to occupy your mind. I smile at the thought of the collectible teaspoon I brought home for Hugh. It had started as a joke. When Hugh went to Japan, he asked me what I wanted from Japan. I jokingly said I wanted a spoon. He brought me back a wooden soup spoon. After that, every time he went somewhere he'd bring me back a spoon. I was only able to return the favor of gifting him a spoon once. When I left, I had all my spoons on display on my kitchen island. I wonder where they are now. I want to go fishing, I answer. Tuck reaches for his mug of black coffee and takes a long drag, skimming off only the cool liquid at the top. He forcibly swallows before looking up at me. There aren't any lakes or rivers nearby, he says. We can go swimming if you'd like. I thought you said there weren't any lakes or rivers nearby. My family has a pool. I mull it over then shake my head, more at myself than in reply of Tuck. What I really want is to call Hugh. I want to know if anyone is in fact looking for me. I want to know the prognosis of my future. I want assurance that if I find my way back home, everything will resume as though I'd never left. I want to know if my job will take me back. I want to know if my apartment has been ransacked. More importantly, I want to know that Hugh still considers me a friend. Will a swim make you happy, Rosie? Tuck asks, bringing me back to his kitchen. I'll pass, but thank you, Tuck. He forces a strained smile. He seems to have lost his appetite. He's just moving his French toast around his plate with his fork. What is your family like, Rosie? He asks, catching me off guard. I can't swallow my gulp of coffee. I get the sense that you've had a tough upbringing. Most people can't stand to be alone, but you seem to manage just fine. Solitude is a practiced art, he says softly. I can't help but digest his words. This is the only way I've ever been. I don't know what you mean, I reply. He meets my eyes and sits taller in his seat. Hmong means the free people. I can't imagine how that has shaped you, Rosie. I read all those articles, read as many books as I could get my hands on, still, you're an enigma. I'm not an enigma, Tuck. You and I are not that different. We are in the business of reading people. You're correct, I had a tough upbringing. It's written all over me, I'm sure. His face softens and he lets out a soft laugh. I remember the first time I realized you had thick skin. It was the first cool day last fall. You and Hugh were both wearing almost identical cardigans. Hugh came up to you and said, "This is how you're supposed to wear a cardigan, bitch." You touched his sleeve and pretended to vomit, then you said, "Sorry, I'm allergic to polyester." I don't know why, but I liked watching you two banter, Tuck recalls. I smile at that memory and then I miss Hugh even more. You're funny, Rosie. Have you always been funny? I shake my head. I push the tines of my fork through the shallow pool of maple syrup on my plate, mulling over whether or not I should open up to Tuck. No, I didn't know I was funny until I was in boot camp. I guess it was an act at first, being the class clown. There was this woman, Angela from Texas. She was so popular because she could just strike up conversations with anyone. She was married, had kids, and so she could bond with other women with a husband and kids. I don't know why, but I wanted to be Angela's friend so bad. I was not popular in school because I was too shy. One day I did something that made Angela laugh, and then she talked to me, and I made my first friend. After that, I just kept trying to make people laugh. It's the only redeeming quality I have. What? Tuck laughs. You're smart, you're beautiful. I shake my head. I can't be smart. Look at me. Before this life, I was barely scraping by. I was never going to be a millionaire or save the world. I was just a government employee making $55,000 a year. I am divorced and about to have a baby out of wedlock, Tuck. By any standard, I'm a failure. He sobers, then intensifies his gaze with the narrowing of his eyes. I see you, Rosie. You self-sabotage because it's easier to fail than to be in the limelight. Why? I am offended and I can't pinpoint why. I set my fork down and rise from my seat. I swipe my coffee mug before heading out onto the front porch. If you like this content, please remember to hit like, leave a comment, subscribe, and share with someone who might enjoy this too.